You're listening to Word on the Reef, diving into marine science on the Great Barrier Reef and beyond, with Tanya Murphy and Brett Goodban. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Word on the Reef. I'm your host, diver and marine conservationist Tanya Murphy, flying solo this week as my trusty co-pilot Brett Goodban is away. So you're with me, carrying on here like a pork chop. And yes, that is a clue about today's topic, but I promise not to bore you. Too much? Okay, so just a quick news headline, which you may have heard in the news earlier. The Australian government and the Australian Greens have strengthened and passed new nature laws, which have been welcomed by environmental groups who have been fighting for Australia's nature laws to be updated for a long time. One of the major points, which we've been talking about on this show quite a bit recently, is Australia's alarming rate of deforestation. Australia is one of the largest deforesters in the developed world. Queensland is leading the nation. We've lost 1 million hectares in the last 3 years alone due to the bulldozing of our forests and bushland, mainly for cattle grazing. And not only does this harm the forests and koalas and the other endangered animals, but it also worsens the erosion and sediment that is running off into the water and smothering our corals and seagrass. So the Australian Marine Conservation Society has welcomed amendments to the loopholes that have allowed this extensive tree clearing to continue in the Great Barrier Reef catchment. These new laws passed yesterday will address those loopholes and enforce reassessment of all riparian clearing, which means clearing of trees near rivers and creeks. So AMCS welcomes this as a major step in protecting the Great Barrier Reef and stopping deforestation in reef catchments. So that's some positive news for your Friday. I mean, those nature laws were in place for more than 20 years, so it's not very often comes around that they get reassessed and improved. So something to celebrate for your Friday morning there. But the actual topic that we're going to be talking about today is something a bit different. So today we're going to be travelling to Cape York. It is the vast, pointy peninsula jutting up from the very top of Queensland. It's the only part of Queensland with two coasts, with the Great Barrier Reef on the east coast and the Gulf of Carpentaria and the Arafura Sea on the west coast. It's one of the hottest, most remote and sparsely populated regions in Australia. Roughly the size of England, but home to only a few thousand people spread across small communities and First Nation homelands. Cape York is a place of staggering natural beauty. Savanna plains, winding rivers teeming with crocodiles, ancient forests, red dirt tracks, and pristine beaches where turquoise water meets wild, untouched coastline. It's full of life, from the iconic palm cockatoo, who uses sticks to play drum beats on branches, to wallabies, goannas, and some of the richest biodiversity found anywhere in the country. It's rugged, isolated, and incredibly special. This region is also home to some of the world's highest density nesting populations of endangered sea turtles. But these precious hatchlings are under threat from an unlikely predator. The humble farmyard pig, brought here by early settlers, has gone rogue, and now more than 2 million of them are snuffling their way across Queensland, pigging out on native vegetation and hogging the habitat that native animals depend on, with the Cape York coast a major hotspot. In turtle nesting season, this is not the good kind of bacon and eggs combo. It's more like an a-pork-alypse for our precious sea turtle eggs. So 2 people working on a solution are with me in the studio today, representing Cape York Natural Resource Management, wildlife ecologist and marine turtle conservation program lead, Dr. Manuela Fischer, and project officer Scott Morrison. Good morning, guys. Welcome to Word on the Reef.
Morning. How are you?
Morning, Tanya.
Great to have you on the show. So before we dive into this pig of a problem, can you please tell us about yourselves? Dr. Fischer, do you want to give us a bit of your background?
Yeah, of course. So I'm originally from Germany, which is also where I completed my master's in biology. And I then moved into the overseas area, working in Africa for a little bit, over a year. Completed my master's thesis there on cheetahs in a human-wildlife conflict project.
And I understand that was very successful because you were telling me earlier, and I was excited to hear that you were able to protect the cheetahs from their conflict with livestock.
That's correct.
Yeah, how did you manage it?
So the project pretty much has been operating for over a decade and collaring hundreds and hundreds of cheetahs with GPS collars, collecting data every 15 minutes. Well, back in the day when I worked there, that was 15 minutes, probably improved by now. Looking at where they're going on the commercial farmland, and found out that they're using hotspots where they accumulate, and other cheetahs coming in and checking out the hotspots where cheetahs are territorial. So when cheetahs on commercial farmland in Namibia cause a trouble in terms of taking calves and having negative impact on the farm, then the farmers are legally allowed to shoot the cheetahs. So the project has found out that if the farmers during the calving season especially move their cows away from those hotspots, that they have absolutely no issues or very limited issues with those cheetahs. So nowadays they work together with the researchers to put collars on rather than going ahead and legally eliminate those cheetahs, because that doesn't work in the long term, because those animals move back into these territories.
Such a great outcome. We don't want to kill off all our cheetahs. We just need to find out where they are and put the calving cattle somewhere different.
That's correct.
Such a win-win. Imagine if we can all coexist on this planet together. That would be nice, wouldn't it? Sorry, I interrupted. What did you do after the cheetah research?
So when I finished my master's, went back to Germany for a little bit, worked on 81 mammal species in Borneo. Not that I ever been there, but we worked on the data set, looking at suitable habitat and mapping it all out, and habitat stuff like deforestation and stuff like that as well was part of it, like you just talked about. And then decided to move to Australia to kind of work in the same environment like I did with the cheetah, human-wildlife interaction on Phillip Island in the south of Victoria. Did my PhD with University of Melbourne down there, and then finally made my way, in between worked in the deforestation section again, so looking at critically endangered lead-beater possums in areas where they proposed to go ahead with deforestation. To protect those areas where those possums are, and then moved to Cairns, worked for the Australian Wildlife Conservancy, leading research projects on northern quolls and northern bettongs. So a lot of my work's been connected to threatened species, remote area work, conservation, and when I worked with AWC, Australian Wildlife Conservancy, I also started to work with Indigenous rangers, which was really rewarding for me. So that's kind of how I ended up becoming the program lead for the Marine Turtles project. So working remotely with Indigenous rangers in Cape York and protecting those really iconic and culturally important threatened species.
Yeah, wow. Every single person we got on this show, we end up feeling jealous of, because we wish we could live everyone's life. There's just not enough time in one life to do all those cool things. Like, I'd love to go and see cheetahs. I've never seen a cheetah in the wild. And I mean, growing up, you probably never knew that you were going to end up working in all these remote places with all these Australian animals.
No, definitely not from growing up in Germany, especially.
Yeah.
It's a very different place to be.
Yeah, so awesome. Okay, so Scott Morrison, not the former PM, of course. Do you want to tell us about your CV? I guess it didn't involve being the Prime Minister, so...
No, we're the same age, but I look a lot better, so that's the improvement, I suppose. But I started work in the Territory in the late 80s in land management, so mainly in the parks, in the NT parks, and also federal national parks. So I was in Kakadu National Park for a number of years, and worked in land management with a whole lot of Indigenous rangers, particularly in Arnhem Land and on the coast, in marine debris programs, and also with turtle work. I've been in Queensland about 7 years, the same thing. I spent a bit of time at Georgetown, the Georgetown area, with the Yeoman Rangers at Tullaroo Indigenous Protected Area. And I've worked with land councils too in the land management side of things. Spent a couple of years in Western Australia doing the same sort of stuff, so yeah.
So you're both based in Cairns, but you've been all around different parts of Australia. It sounds like you're not a city person.
Nah, that's right.
Okay, so let's talk about these pesky pigs. So where can you find feral pigs in Australia, and where are they the worst?
Yeah, so pigs are across almost 50% of Australia, and they are expanding, especially in the north. We've had a number of really wet seasons, so they can breed, every 3 months in a good season. and they can breed quite young. So Queensland and North Queensland has the highest population of feral pigs. There are a lot in the territory, but there's less people and less industry to report on that. But yeah, Queensland has the most pigs statistically, and Queensland obviously has really high industry for cattle, horticulture, just general production that supports the human planet. So the impacts are huge across Australia, but particularly in Queensland.
Yeah, so you were telling me that they need to be near water to survive, obviously, and we're in the wet tropics up here, so I guess there's a lot of water around for them. And when we've had big wet seasons and flood events, it just enables them to explode, doesn't it?
Yeah, so they can certainly, in a big year, they can spend longer in areas they may have even transited in a drier year. And as I say, they can breed up quickly. So I think as young as 6 months. And, the litter can be 10 to 12 pigs per pig. So, yeah, it's a sort of cocktail for a population explosion, really. And it's a, ongoing battle to keep them at low numbers.
I was reading that the first person to introduce a feral European pig to Australia was Captain James Cook from England. He brought a male and female and released them on purpose because that was a common practice back then, because they wanted to populate all these new places with familiar animals that they could go and hunt, which we now know was a silly move. But regardless of that, farmers have been bringing them here as well. So they've become a big problem. And it seems they're virtually indestructible because not only can they survive in the hottest parts of Australia, but you were telling me that they can live under snow as well, because this is originally a European pig, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a sort of story of a super pig breed in the Canada, sort of North America area that I think it was about 3 years ago. They were doing some kind of survey, aerial survey, and they noticed this sort of heat signature under the snow and found these pigs were hunkered down under significant depth of snow to keep warm in really minus degrees. So
Super pigs. So they're going to be around long after we disappear, by the sounds of it, them and the cockroaches, right? They can survive anything.
Yeah, good combination.
Okay, guys, I know it's impossible to get an exact head count, but what sort of numbers are the local landholders and graziers reporting in terms of pigs on the west coast of Cape York?
Well, WACTA has been keeping records. The Western Cape Turtle Abatement Program has been keeping records for years. I'll let Manny talk about that. But yeah, from a producer's perspective, there is a lot of cattle properties on the west, particularly in the southern area, and people are removing thousands a year. So that's through ground shooting from people that work on the properties. It's from visitors who are invited to shoot recreationally. There's also a lot of aerial shooting because the properties are, let's say 50,000 hectares, 250,000 hectares. They're large properties. Helicopters are like a Toyota or a pair of fencing pliers, So aerial shooting's a really important component, and some conglomerates of properties are removing up to 10,000 a year, especially, as I mentioned earlier, with these really wet seasons. So that's a significant amount of animal and disturbance.
Yeah, and like you said, they can breed every 3 months. That is a very prolific animal, isn't it?
Yeah, so the statistics say in terms of managing pigs wherever you are in the country, really, you need to remove about 70% of the population every year. So that's an ongoing task. Yeah.
We really made it hard for ourselves by introducing these animals, didn't we?
Yeah.
We're paying the consequences now.
Indeed.
Okay, so let's talk about the impacts. What impacts do feral pigs have on us and our wildlife and our landscape?
So pigs are a machine, really. A single boar can dig up a gigantic area as an individual and cause a lot of havoc. I was speaking to a farmer in Kuranda who had 100 kilo plus boar removing saxa, I think the plant, or salxa. It's a thorny Indonesian fruit, and it could remove that easily despite the really thick thorns. They push over pawpaw trees, they eat cane. There are occasions where people have gone to harvest the cane and found the field's been eaten from the inside out, so there's just a wall of cane on the outside but no product in the middle. And they'll eat watermelons, they'll eat young lambs, calves, dead kangaroos.
Yeah.
And It's about the disturbance too, because they're obviously disturbing the soil. So there's a whole lot of threatened species which are impacted by them, and it's sort of inadvertently, but there's lots of orchids that are endangered that the pigs disturb. There's a butterfly, for example, that relies on a particular plant. It's only found in a really small area in New South Wales, and pigs come through there and root up the plants.
Eating them all.
So you name it, they eat it, and they consume a lot. And they're also, I suppose, fairly annoying in the way they eat. So in Mareeba recently, I saw some pumpkins where the farmers had laid out the plastic to keep the weeds down, and there's a seed hole for the seed to come through. So as a pumpkin grew, the pigs just walked along the plastic and just picked the seedlings out. And even just the fruit, just here and there, or cane, just individual cane, chomp it at the bottom, falls over, move to the next one. They don't even consume the lot. So they're pretty greedy.
They are actual pigs.
Yeah.
They literally are pigs.
Indeed.
I mean, the poor things, they're very intelligent creatures. They're doing their natural behaviours, but it's us humans who have brought them here where they don't belong. They're just trying to do what they've evolved to do. So we humans are you might say that we are the pigs, but anyway, feral pigs impact 148 species of threatened flora and fauna apparently, and cost us 106.5 million in direct economic costs to the agricultural sector, and they increase carbon pollution by uprooting the soil, which releases a lot of carbon dioxide across the globe. They also, because they're always wallowing beside waterways, they actually worsen that erosion of soil into the waterways.
Yeah.
How much of an impact do you think that has?
The impact's significant enough that the federal government is funding a carbon abatement scheme solely related to, well, pigs and other hoofed feral animals, but you might be familiar with the Savannah Burning Carbon Credit Scheme, which is across Northern Australia, where people burn and earn credits for early burning. So if you burn early, you don't vaporise the country, basically. You get outlines of trees, like a body drawn on the ground in the street, with a detective murder sort of thing. You don't get that with early fires. You might get spots, but you don't get a large extent. So there's a lot of people earning credits through early burning, and the government is investigating that through removal of pigs because of the effect they have through carbon release, soil disturbance, pugging, changing water quality.
Yep. Incentives to do the right thing and remove the pigs is a good idea. But feral pigs can also be a threat to humans, right? Because they carry a lot of diseases that humans can catch.
Yeah, so they have a high parasite load, and some of those can be transferred to humans. It can be through the parasite falling off the pig and crawling onto a human or a cow or a lamb, for example, but also through consumption of meat. But there's also obviously the threat of African swine fever and foot and mouth disease from overseas, which is in Asia and could come to Australia, which would be devastating for our industries and our native environment.
So to find out more about how these feral pigs are impacting turtle nesting, we're going to visit the west coast of Cape York. That's the left side of the peninsula, which faces onto the Gulf of Carpentaria. And to go there, we're going to need a four-wheel drive because it's a remote countryside. So, Dr. Fischer, can you take us to that coast? Which towns and traditional lands will we drive through, and what sort of distances are we talking about to go there?
So basically our project runs from the very south, which is the community of Komanyama. And as you head north, you come through Pompera. We work with the Arakoon APN Cape York Rangers, Napanum, Mapoon, and at the very, very tip of Cape York, you have the Aputama Rangers, which is the Bamaga area. Unfortunately, you can't just imagine driving through each of these communities in one go. So there's pretty much like one main road that goes up into the middle of Cape York, and then you have to duck out to the left to go to the coast where those communities and our turtle sites are, and then come back into the middle of the road. So there's a lot of distance to cover to get in and out to each of these communities, and the longest way to go is really from Cairns up to Bamaga, which is about 1,000 kilometres, so it takes us about 14 hours altogether, pure driving to get there.
Wow.
depending on the weather, because that is really when the road is open and good to drive through.
You're going to need a lot of podcasts to listen to.
I sure do download music and podcasts before I go on a drive.
Excellent. Well, we've done about 50 hours of talking on this show so far, so that'll cover a couple of trips.
Yeah.
And so how was it for you the first time you ever went to Cape York? What's it like? I've never actually been to the west coast of Cape York. Describe it for me.
It's an amazing landscape. So as you already mentioned, it's very remote. There's not many people. You don't come across, sometimes. I just drove a couple of months ago to Arakoon Ranger Base. That was pretty much 4.5 hours as you turn off on the main road, just myself. There was no other cars on the road the entire time. And you come through tropical savannas, woodlands. There's a lot of swamp areas and open flat plains. There's major river system. You've got the Mitchell River and the Jardine. And then obviously as we come to our study sites, you come into the coastal areas, mangrove areas. And the amount of wildlife you see on the roads is just incredible, especially when you take off in the early morning hours. Often I hit the road before the sun comes up, so I miss all the tourists and all the people that slow me down. And the road is just covered with wallabies and iguanas, snakes. It's really, really beautiful. And as you come into the waterways, there's birds everywhere. And yeah, it's amazing.
Wow, that is real Dinky Dye Australia. So if there's anyone out there that hasn't been and wants to check it out, make sure you've got a 4-wheel drive, lots of extra water and fuel, I guess, first aid kit, and at least a long weekend.
And a recovery kit in case you get stuck.
In case you get bogged, especially. Yeah, that happens. So watch out for the wet season. A lot of the roads will be closed. But yes, with a bit of preparation and at least several days, you can explore the ancient part of Australia that's much less impacted by, modernisation of city life. Apart from, of course, these pesky pigs, which are not part of the ancient landscape. So talking about turtle nesting on the west coast of Cape York, when is turtle nesting on the west coast and what sort of turtles nest there?
Yeah, so the turtle nesting kind of just has come to a stop. So they start nesting in about June, July until through to now. We're still a little bit in the hatching season now where the hatchlings come out of the nests, but yeah, really that dry season is the peak. And from like the south around Komanyama and Pompero up to Napanum, we get olive ridley turtles, so it's a very genetically distinct stock and very important. And then as further north you go, the more and more you come into flatback habitat. So up in the north in Bamaka country, we predominantly have flatback turtles on the beaches, and on Grab Island, which is one of the main worldwide rookeries, our flatback turtles. So, and then occasionally we get the odd hawksbill turtle here and there, and the green turtles as well.
Wow, that's so interesting, because on the Great Barrier Reef on the east coast, we mainly get green sea turtles and hawksbills.
That's correct.
Yeah, and I've been diving on the reef for many years, and I've actually never seen an olive ridley or a flatback. So it just goes to show how they have their special areas where they like to hang out.
That's right.
So yeah, if I want to see an olive ridley or a flatback, I now know where I need to go. And the nesting season in the west coast is winter, which is the opposite as well. Our green sea turtles are just starting to nest now because they nest in summer on the Great Barrier Reef. So it's kind of opposite there as well. Very interesting how they all fill different niches in this season and geographically. So what sort of impact do the pigs have on the nests, especially before this program started to help them? Is it just a few nests being destroyed or a full-blown Ham-ageddon?
So basically, since 1993, there's been individuals and organizations doing a lot of work on looking at turtle nests and finding out what the impacts of pigs are on the nests. And they have found that between 70 up to 100% of the turtle nests are actually taken by pigs. So really we had absolutely no new recruits on some of these beaches, or very little, which is not, you can't have a viable population, stable population if 70 up to 100% of the nests are taken by pigs. So really what happened after that is that the Western Cape Turtle Threat Abatement Alliance was formed. And the alliance was specifically formed around that topic. So the funding that comes in is specifically targeting those threats. So we are doing aerial culling each year, so up to 12 aerial culls each year, and then also turtle nest monitoring to look at the impact So it's led by Indigenous ranger groups. There's 6 of them, like I just said, Komanyama, Pampara, Arakoon, Abanamapoon and Bamaga. And it's in completely Indigenous led. And so they are working every dry season on these key nesting beaches to identify where those threats are occurring, how many nests are taking. So they go out doing monitoring every year, monitoring all the nests, monitoring all the impact on the nest, looking at hatching success by digging up the nests and counting the eggs, as well as doing these threat abatement methods. So we have funding provided for years and years and years to create a solid program around aerial shooting. So each ranger group gets funded through the Queensland and Australian government, especially Nest to Ocean as our main funder. So they go out every year twice per group, which is 12 shoots a year, and they shoot thousands and thousands of pigs every year to protect those turtles. And then they go out and monitor the beaches, see if it actually has an impact and if it actually works. And it has shown that it works. It's kind of like a sustainable clutch loss is supposed to be less than 30%. So anything that is under is meant to be okay for keeping a stable population. And we have shown, especially for the flatbacks, that we are able to drop the numbers below that 30% threshold, which is an amazing achievement from the Alliance. Mm-hmm. And it shows that all the efforts that go in and all the time of the rangers spending at the beaches and camping in those remote and crazy isolated areas. Like, I mean, some of those places are only accessible by boat. So it's a logistical challenge to set up a camp and be out there for up to a month. And yeah, so it really shows how successful the project is and how much of this work is actually saving the species.
Well done. Good job to you and everyone else involved. I'm glad to hear that you've reduced the predation below 30%, which is what your goal was. So you're saving the sea turtles of the future, but they take 20 plus years to mature to the point where they will breed, right? And this problem's been going on for a while. So how are the adult populations of sea turtles? Have they been impacted by past predation?
Well, like you said, they take so long to breed. We don't really know because I wasn't there 20, 30 years ago, but definitely I would think so. And we're kind of seeing dropping numbers in nesting these days. So especially for olive ridleys, because they're a bit more vulnerable to pig predation because of the way how they breed and where they breed, and also more vulnerable to other threats. But yeah, there's less and less nesting been recorded. Unfortunately, the flatbacks are doing okay, they're quite stable, but the ridleys are showing decline.
Okay. So are there any other tools we can use to protect the turtle eggs, for example, by building pig-proof fences or cages around the nests?
Yeah, so another thing that we're doing is putting exclusion cages over the nests. So that's been pretty successful as well. So the rangers have actually been upskilled last year to do their own welding. So we keep all the work on country, and the ranger groups are doing their own, building their own cages, and then they put them over the nest. As soon as they find a nest, when they do their beach patrols, they put them over the nests, and that helps from the pigs or other predators. You know, we come across nests that are dug up by iguanas or dingoes as well. It shows that it actually keeps them out. We often see that the surrounding of the cages is kind of dug up and there's footprints everywhere from whoever predator it was, but they can't manage to get under. So it's been really successful in terms of protecting those individual nests on ground. Obviously we can't, because for example in Bamaga we have thousands of nests every year. We can't put a cage over each of them. Also Bamaga is only accessible by boat, so that limits it anyway. But other beaches where we have very little nesting, we really put a cage over every nest, so it's really successful.
Amazing work. Let's talk about one of the other major threats to nesting turtles, which is rising temperatures due to climate change. So what impact is that having on the turtles on the west coast of Cape York?
Yeah, so with the rising temperatures, it has been shown that the turtle eggs are incubating at a much higher temperature, which for turtle eggs, so big of a background, in the first third of the incubation period, the temperature within the nest chamber and the egg kind of determines what sex the turtle turns into. So it's kind of like hot chicks and cool dudes, right? So if the temperature goes over a certain temperature, the eggs turn into female hatchlings. If it goes under, it turns into male. So in an ideal world, you obviously have kind of like a 50-50. So like the eggs that are further down in the sand are cooler and the ones further up in the chamber are hotter. So it turns into 50-50. But with those rising temperatures, we really have seen and that's not only on the West Coast, that's actually across all of the world, I would say, that those hatchlings turn more and more into females. So basically what we're facing now is that we don't have enough males in the population anymore. So what the rangers have been doing as well are helping me with a research project that we started. We're also working with JCU on this, putting temperature data loggers into the nest chamber as the female is laying their eggs to track the temperature in the nest, as well as a meter away from the nest as a little bit of a control site. And then we put our cages over the nest and put some shade cloths over it so the temperature in the nest drops through that shading. And what we have found, and so far we have only very limited data because we only just started this project, but it has shown the first data set in the earlier dry season when the temperatures are a little bit cooler. We're actually doing all right on the West Coast, so it looks like the eggs are quite 50-50. As we come into the later season and the air temperatures naturally warms up, those shade cloths drop the temperature enough to keep the eggs at the 50-50, because otherwise they would go into that female-based hatchling.
Yeah. I find that really interesting because those turtles are nesting in winter. And even so, by the end of winter, it is warm enough that without those shade cloths, you would find that they will all come out female. So we are well into alarming global warming territory when even the winter temperatures are too warm for the turtles to have 50-50 coming out as male and female, even in winter. So it's good to know that those shade cloths are working at the moment. I guess we're locked in to see more warming in future though, so let's see if we need even more cooling methods in the future. So let's talk about the east coast of the Cape now. You've had success with this pig control program protecting the turtle eggs on the west coast of the Cape York, and so now you're going to replicate that on the east coast, which faces the Great Barrier Reef, and that includes remote towns like Lockhart River and Cooktown. Cooktown's not quite so remote. You can get there on a sealed road. So can you tell us a bit about why there's a need for this project on the east coast?
So basically our main turtle rookeries on the east coast are within the Great Barrier Reef areas. So there's Milman Island, which holds the world's greatest hawksbill rookery, and then there's Rain Island, which is one of the world's greatest green turtle rookeries. And it's been shown over the years, again, with the rising sea temperatures and the rising air temperatures and all that, that these places are actually not that good anymore. So A, there's been shown that a lot of females are born, and B, a lot of the nests are getting inundated more and more. So the rising sea level is coming up too high so that the nests are just getting inundated with water, which means then the entire clutch is lost. And it's predicted by a couple of researchers that actually in the future, as sea levels continue, that those low-laying cays may not be available at all anymore for these turtles. So this project on the east coast and the mainland of Cape York has come in place just recently to kind of look at the key nesting sites that we have on the east coast, because at the moment there's very little nesting activity from what we've been speaking to traditional owners of the land and parks and wildlife and that. But it could well be that when those low-laying cays disappear in the future, that those turtles seeking for new nesting areas, which may be the closest place, is the mainland of Australia, which is Cape York. So.
We need to make the mainland safe for them, just in case they need to start nesting there instead, right? And it's perfect time for you to be talking to us about this, because just last week we had Dr. Mark Reid from the Marine Park Authority talking about how they are evacuating some of the sea turtle eggs from Rain Island, which is the green sea turtle nesting site. They're evacuating some of the eggs from there to another more elevated island to save them from the rising sea levels. But as you say, in the future we might also need... There's going to be a lot more turtles being displaced from their nesting sites, so they might come to the mainland. So do you have any idea whereabouts on the eastern mainland we should be concentrating the pig control efforts to encourage more turtles to nest there?
I might hand that over to Scott. I have been talking for a little while now.
So there has been ongoing pig control from the local communities, because people use them as a food source, for example, and also people in industry will remove them off their properties. But also there's a lot of national park land and agreements through parks and landholders, so there is a fair bit of aerial shooting that goes on that concentrates on pigs. And through through that, they're protecting turtle nests already. But yeah, as we've discussed, what we hope is to set up a similar alliance on the East Coast, and we're talking with 3 or 4 different Indigenous groups now to try to set up another program. The thing about the East Coast, while there is turtles nesting, the access is quite difficult, and the nesting beaches aren't as, I suppose, consistent. You know, the west is a huge sort of drip of sand basically, and the east is different structure. So
it's more rocky and gravelly, did you say?
Yeah, that's right. So not that I'm the turtle expert, but turtles require a certain consistency of sand to nest in.
They have to dig a hole just with their bare flippers, right? So it's going to be hard if it's gravel.
They don't really utilise gravel areas. Yeah, and then the other thing we're facing is the wet season. So like you can't even get there. The main road to Cape York will be shut off by rivers and just not passable. So there might be a bit of helicoptering around and doing all those fun things and jumping on boats. And yeah, we don't know yet. We're in the phase of figuring out how we're going to do things, I think.
Oh, sounds fun. Can I come too? I want to do the helicoptering and the boating and protecting the turtles as well. So if there are any listeners out there who like to go four-wheel driving and camping on the Cape's remote coastlines, what advice do you have for people to ensure they are respecting turtle nesting and not causing any further damage?
So there's a couple of beaches on the west coast where tourists can actually go to. One of them is Pennyfather Beach, one of my favourite, and it's really beautiful. You are allowed to drive your four-wheel drive on the beach there, but there's other ways around. So you can go behind the dunes and drive in there, which is actually more fun, but people do get more stuck there. So depends on your experience.
Wait,
but,
I have to know, have you got stuck?
Oh, yeah, I get stuck all the time. For some reason, especially on that beach. But not like, it's, I have been four-wheel driving for many, many years, so I'm actually quite okay. But you can't always avoid it. And so, first of all, I would suggest not to drive on the beaches at all when there is a turtle nesting season in place if you can avoid it. Another thing is really to not litter your plastic, because plastic is a huge impact. If you do find a turtle nesting, more than welcome to have a look, but stay back and turn your headphones off because it really disturbs them. And as well, if you find a nest, you can actually protect it. So what we usually do is collecting any of the debris or like logs and fallen tree branches and stuff and put it around the nesting area. So if there is other people coming along that don't know that there is a nest, because they obviously disappear with the rain and the winds, then the sticks and everything is still there, and people obviously don't drive over these structures. So that's kind of like what you can do on ground, but then also like awareness, like you talk to other people, make them aware of the threat, do your background research, and just enjoy the environment without disturbing the animals on the land.
Yeah, you said turn your headphones off. Do you mean headlights or
torches? Sorry, like your lights on the car ideally as well, but your torches, don't shine it straight on them and don't go too, they're really skittish sometimes, so if you go too close, they might turn around and abort the nesting and go back to sea. Yeah,
I mean, you don't want random strangers coming into the maternity ward and shining headlights on you when you're giving birth. It's going to really stress you out. So look after our nesting turtles and find out when it's nesting season, and don't go driving your motorbikes on the beach at that time, because you can't, obviously the eggs are under the sand, so you might not know that you're harming these nests. So do your research and know where
like
you're going.
Marine debris is a big thing as well. Make it a fun thing for your kids. Do a little bit of a beach cleanup. You know, there's so many things you can do because unfortunately the western beaches are very polluted with plastic.
Yes, so we've only got 2 minutes left, but let's have one last note to finishing on. I guess the work that you guys are doing with protecting the turtle nests locally is so important, and it's wonderful, but those measures alone can't solve all the problems that sea turtles are facing. So what advice do you have for people out there? What do we need to be doing as a society? Even people, there's international listeners who won't actually be going four-wheel driving on the beach, but even from afar, is there things people can do in their own lives to make the world a safer place for sea turtles?
Yeah, sure. Like I said, avoid littering is probably a big one. Avoid single-use plastic in general. It's really disturbing the turtles and the nesting and any marine life, really. And just create awareness. I mean, everyone who's listening to this show knows about those threats now that we've been talking about. Just create awareness, because people don't know. Like, people just don't know about these things. And
share the podcast with a friend.
Share the podcast with a friend. That's exactly what you should do. And
raising awareness, letting people know about the plight of turtles, especially around the impacts of climate change and the need for climate action is one that I'm really passionate about. So I've only got 30 seconds left, so that sadly is all we have time for today. So representing Cape York Natural Resource Management, Wildlife Ecologist and Marine Turtle Conservation Program Lead Dr. Manuela Fischer and Project Officer Scott Morrison, thanks so much for all your amazing work, and thanks for joining us on Word on the Reef today.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
And thanks to all our listeners for joining us on Word on the Reef. I'm Tanya Murphy, your host, and I'll be back on Cairns FM 89.1 next Friday at 10 a.m. with more awesome marine science adventures. Best fishes, and see you next time.